of Tibetans arriving in Chicago are part of a Tibetan resettlement project, which is bringing 1,000 Tibetans to the United States. One of their goals is to increase awareness about the plight of Tibet.
Welcome.
This is the story of saving the Tibetan culture, a culture at risk of extinction. It explores the world of Tibetan culture from two perspectives. One comes from the spiritual and temporal leader of Tibet in exile, the 14th Dalai Lama. The other through the eyes of Tibetans now living in America, such as Norbu Samphel. He was born in a traditional nomadic family in Tibet and is a recent immigrant to Chicago.
I arrived in America in the summer of 1992. I have been in the United States for almost 2 years now. Tibet sometimes feels like a dream because I left Tibet when I was just 6 years old and I have not seen much of Tibet. So I was raised in India dreaming about Tibet. I was hearing stories about Tibet and actually I would like to go and see myself how is Tibet. In old Tibet, my family members were nomads. My mother, she didn't know to read and write. Our family lived in the western part of Tibet. So we used to move from one place to another place like gypsy, tending our livestock, looking for grassy places. They used to live isolated from the villages, from the towns, cities, because they would have to look after their animals.
Nestled between China and India, surrounded by the mighty Himalayas, Tibet became a Buddhist culture with a unified government during the 7th century AD. Distinguished for its advanced medical system, thousands of temples, works of art, and literature compiled over a millennium, Tibet's ancient culture remained intact and viable up to the moment the Chinese invaded in 1950. Lamas and scholars identified Lama Dondrup as the 14th Dalai Lama, the reincarnated Buddha of compassion, when he was 3 years old in 1939. A search throughout Tibet was made for a boy who matched the encoded description received through prophecy and visionary indications, and who would show signs of recognition of people and things from his past lives. Separated from his own family, renamed Tenzin Gyatso, the young boy was brought to Lhasa, the capital of Tibet, and installed in the Potala Palace. He was raised to become both spiritual and secular leader of his people. Tibet was invaded by the new communist regime in 1950. At the time, they believed that by taking Tibet, they could secure and extend their own national borders, provide themselves with an important strategic position in Central Asia, exploit the natural resources of Tibet, and provide sparsely populated land for their own growing population. Then, 15 years old, the Dalai Lama was thrust into the role of supreme secular leader of Tibet and onto the world stage.
Now today, we are really facing a problem, the problem which is the threat of extinction of Tibetan nation, and Tibetan nation with its unique cultural heritage.
Sensitive to communist criticism of Tibetan feudalism and intrigued with the possibilities of modernizing his country, the Dalai Lama tried to negotiate a peaceful coexistence with the Chinese government. Traveling to China to see Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai, the Dalai Lama became alarmed for the fate of his country when, during his final meeting with Mao, the Chinese leader leaned over and whispered, "I understand you, but religion is poison." Over the next 9 years, the occupation turned ever more sinister as the Chinese started systematically dismantling the old social and economic fabric of Tibet. By 1959, the Chinese had tanks lining the streets of Tibet's capital city, Lhasa. The now 24-year-old Dalai Lama had to make the most momentous choice of his life, whether to stay and commit his nation to war, or to escape into exile and try to save his country from the outside. His brother, Tenzin Chogyal, recalls that fateful night.
A 12-year-old boy, I felt that if we had to fight, we would be victorious. But now if I look back, just the very thought of reliving that particular night, it's quite frightening. Yeah, it's a miracle that His Holiness was able to escape. Now, Tibet was, by 59, a Chinese colony. Chinese military occupation has thoroughly penetrated every sphere of Tibetan way of life. And whatever we did, it was just looking in the fishbowl. The Chinese knew everything. We left Nobulinga at night. We could see the camp lights. The lights that were installed along the barbed wire of the camp can be seen very vividly. We traveled the whole night, the whole next day. Then in the evening, we reached our first place of stop. His Holiness was looking from the window of this house. I went to him, and then he asked me how Mom was. And the next thing he said, it's good to be free. Yeah. Even though we had our country that time, it was a big prison. The Chinese could do anything they want, anytime. Yeah, so we really cherished being free.
The Dalai Lama, followed by thousands of other Tibetans, crossed into India, the only country that welcomed them. Though India was a poor country, then Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru leased the Tibetans land, helped them establish schools, and provided jobs.
We always are grateful to the government of India. We appeal Pandit Nehru. Pandit Nehru personally took special interest and a sense of commitment.
Even though Nehru opened India to the Tibetans on humanitarian grounds, he had strong ties to China. He believed that together with his friend Zhou Enlai, they would work to create a greater Asia. Nehru felt particularly betrayed by Zhou Enlai when the Chinese army attacked India in 1962.
Probably it must have been one of the greatest disappointments Mr. Nehru ever experienced. He was tricked. Nehru believed in Greater Asia. And I think he was a very idealistic man, very intelligent and intellectual, and maybe a person before his time. And probably he relied on moral values. But Zhou Enlai never had moral values. So it takes two hands to clap, right? Zhou Enlai wasn't there, you see. He was tricked completely.
The Dalai Lama appealed to several Western leaders to help the Tibetans, including then-President Lyndon Johnson.
Many years ago, President Johnson, I wrote a letter to the President of Canada and President of America and appeal take some Tibetan refugee. Then Canada accepted.
But America, already mired in its war in Vietnam, didn't want another regional confrontation with China. President Johnson declined the Dalai Lama's request. Turned down by most Western countries, the Tibetans realized that their settlement in India might be permanent. While Tibetan life in India began in tent camps, eventually more permanent settlements had to be built.
Well, when we came to India, it was completely a different world, really, and we were in some ways not prepared. And I must say that there are many, many Tibetans also died in India, in exile, because of the change of climate and the diet. And it was really, I think Tibetans and those that suffered so much, not only in the escape and in the hands of Chinese, but also our conditions were very, very, very poor and very difficult. And so many people have died in the heat of India.
So in India, we were able to get a foothold where we could live a life according to the values that we have as Tibetans.
The Tibetans settled and established a government in exile in Dharamsala, nestled in the Himalayan foothills. The stream of refugees has continued for 35 years. Semfel's family escaped in the early 60s. Semphil returns to India after his first year and a half in the United States.
I needed to come back home to my family before I could truly accept my new life in America. I wanted to hear people speak in Tibetan, to celebrate New Year in the traditional way. I was lonely for the smell of incense and the sound of Tibetan music.
Semphil's mother, Tenzin, has become a nun since her husband died 12 years ago. She reveals her own personal story of escaping the oncoming Chinese army over 30 years ago.
My late husband was about to be shot by the Chinese. They pointed guns at him and I prayed to the Dalai Lama and they spared him. Everyone wanted to escape, but we left with only our children and some livestock. The others stayed back, hoping against hope that they wouldn't be killed. Then they couldn't get out. So my brothers and sisters, they all got captured and killed. I put whatever I could carry in the pouch of my chuba and carried the baby on my back.
When we were crossing the Himalayas, we'll have to climb up from Tibet side and climb down towards Nepal side. I was 6 years old, so I was just trying to walk. One day, when we were climbing down from a steep slope, my mother slipped and she fell, and upon her I also fell, and we slided. We just rolled on and rolled on for some distance. We were held up just because there was a big boulder which stopped us rolling down. Otherwise we might have gone deep down into a gorge. That was a frightening scene, and because of that fear, the incident remained in my mind.
When we were close to the Nepal border, we were chased by the Chinese. We hid behind big boulders during the daytime without any food and ran at night. I was pregnant with my daughter and I had a son younger than Semphil who died along the way. In Nepal, my son had a little fever and we only had some thampa and nothing else to eat, and we had to beg door to door to look for food. But he died, this son, who was such a good boy, such a sweet boy. When we reached Pathankot station, we received food rations and my 2 sons were taken away to school. We had apprehension. We had a lot of fear that we may not see them in our lifetime again. We were not very sure where they were being taken away, and we were asked to go to the road construction site.
As the bus drove up and up, then a few children started crying, calling their parents, calling their mother's name.
For 3 years, I worked on road construction, carrying a baby on my back and another by my side.
Of course, to get separated from one's own dear and near ones is a kind of tragedy, but we think that is a physical sort of tragedy. We always keep, our mental, spiritual communication or link or affection will always be there, no matter where we live.
Semphil's niece, Tenzi, now attends the Tibetan Children's Village School, as her uncle did before her.
Deep river. There was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
It was, of course, the turning point of my life as well as life of Tibet as a nation, because many children like myself were separated in the same way from their parents, and nowadays we realize that that was a big step towards educating Tibetan children.
So many parents died on the way from Tibet to India while they were fleeing, and all we had was a handful of children who had nobody to look after them. We've had to face this breakdown of families, separation from the families from the very beginning of our exile life.
We established our own school so that we can not only learn modern education, but also can sustain or can learn our traditional education. These education, two systems combined to produce one human being with the full knowledge about the world and meantime maintain calm mind so that such person really can utilize all the knowledge, all the ability in a proper constructive way.
In total, we are looking after 35,000 children in 85 different schools and trying to provide them with an education that is in tune with the modern education, as well as try to give them an education that will give them a sense of identity, that will make them feel proud to be Tibetans. There is no proper education for the Tibetans inside Tibet, be it a man, woman, monk or a nun, or even children. That's why we have so many children coming out of Tibet every year. And the parents bring the children out of Tibet to leave them here, and then they go back. They want proper education so much so that they don't mind sacrificing not seeing the children for a few years, or even who knows if they ever see them again or not. These are going to be the ones who will be able to stand on their own one day and say, we are Tibetans. We want the world to know that we haven't given up. But I think it'll be difficult for the children to relate to Tibet because they've never seen. So for them, they have a very beautiful, imaginary Tibet in their mind.
I'm a human being. Now, so many human beings are there, and I am so-called one of the Tibetans. Now, what is a Tibetan? Then we start rediscovering again. And since everybody wants to have some kind of identity, I think it's in us, it's a built-in program to search for that identity.
Tibetan identity is deeply intertwined with the basic elements of their unique Buddhist practice, such as compassion, altruism, and an understanding of the interdependent nature of all things.
Tibetan culture, which is nurtured from Buddhist philosophy or Buddhism, I think the main feature is acceptance. Whatever happens, first there's acceptance. There isn't that heartbreaking reaction, or you go sort of, you're freaking out. You don't freak out because you accept.
If you were to essentialize the entire Buddhist philosophy or the view into one word, it would be interdependence. And if you want to essentialize Buddhist practice or action into one word, it's altruism. Because when you realize everything is interdependent, so what we think, what we say, and what we do have consequences in the future action, not only for ourselves, but for other people also. If we truly become responsible for ourselves, perhaps then we might become truly responsible for the world.
Basic human nature is gentleness and the ability to cultivate or to increase human compassion. You see, everyone has that ability. Isn't that possibility always there? Provided, make effort with clear awareness and usefulness about compassion, about non-violence. Once you realize it and make effort, then every person, even if it's the most cruel person, have that seed.
Fundamentally, we are all human beings. We all have the desire to be happy and not to suffer. With this kind of view, and also then particularly on the deep teachings on compassion, it says that whoever hurts you or harms you in the way that you can never imagine, may that person becomes our greatest teacher.
In Dharamsala, where Tibetan Buddhism can be practiced in freedom, the ancient rituals are still performed. Here in Namgyal Monastery, monks burn the old, dark, and negative spirits in preparation to welcome the new year with a clear mind and a rejuvenated spirit.
Celebrating New Year, Losar, the Tibetan way, includes burning away evil spirits, making offerings for the new year, and throwing zampa, roasted barley flour. And all this is done to appease the gods and seek their blessings and protections.
There has never been a moment when all my brothers and parents were together. So one of them is always missing. My mother, whenever she's not able to see anybody, any of her sons, she sometimes cries. She feels loneliness because all of her sons are out of her sight.
As difficult as it was for Tibetan families in exile, for those remaining in Tibet during the Cultural Revolution, the situation was tragic. Repression, arrest, and death became everyday occurrences for Tibetans.
The destruction that has taken place under Chinese rule of Tibet is immense. They destroyed over 6,000 monasteries and temples. And when they destroyed it, they worked out a very systematic system by which nothing is wasted. So the first batch comes and takes all the jewelries from the statues. Then the second batch comes and takes bigger things. Then the third batch comes and takes some other things. Then it's dynamite. Then our people are told to go and get the timber for their wood fuel. Probably we can sort of compare their looting and destroying what the Hans did to Europe in the 11th century.
Most important of all is not just the destruction of monasteries. What is the greatest loss is really the knowledge. Many of the very learned lamas, as well as the learned scholars and the great realized masters, many of them been, as you know, killed in the hands of the Chinese, have died.
One such master who survived is Dr. Tenzin Chodak, who was arrested immediately after the Dalai Lama escaped. He was tortured and imprisoned for 17 years.
When I first got out of prison, I felt really very, very sad. As a result of the Cultural Revolution, the medical system was destroyed, the monasteries were destroyed, and the economic and political system had collapsed. Over 1.2 million people were killed, and there was nothing to eat, nothing. When I came out of the prison, I saw many people who were forced to kill and eat cats and dogs. I saw them going down into the valleys, up into the mountains to search for edible plants, anything to eat.
considered one of the most knowledgeable people in the 20th century about ancient Tibetan medicine and herbal remedies. Dr. Chodak was one of the few masters in this discipline who survived.
The Tibetan medical treatise was edited in the 8th century. In the last section, it says there will be new diseases caused by chemical reactions and pollution. It says this coincides with an increase in population. Tibetan medicine could be very helpful in the future. Some medicines we can still make, but there are many other treatments which we cannot because of scarcity of herbs and environmental degradation. The most subtle thing discussed in Tibetan medicine is how to treat the heart. The heart is the most important because when we die, all our energies go into the heart. All thought resides in the heart. For example, when we are afraid, the heart beats fast, not the brain. Everything exists in the heart.
Tibet has been called the wisdom culture. It is their very devotion to Buddhist principles and the subtler spiritual qualities of human existence that left them vulnerable to the violence of the communist Chinese regime.
Under His Holiness's leadership, our whole movement, based on non-violence against the Chinese, probably it will not work, not because the method is bad. Method is excellent. It is faultless. But will it work with the Chinese?
After a period of relative quiet, in 1987 and 1989, nuns and monks led renewed protests against Chinese occupation. Many were killed, were captured and tortured. Some escaped.
Mao had said that political power comes out of the barrel of a gun. The Chinese will take non-violence as a sign of weakness because they have been taught and shown always through violence.
These nuns are recent arrivals to India and freedom. They are building a new Shugseb nunnery in Dharamsala. For their participation in the demonstrations of 1987 and 89, they were captured, arrested, and tortured. Their experiences have left their mark.
They'd been tortured very badly, raped in the prisons. Therefore, there was no way they could remain in Tibet.
After we were captured and before we went to prison, we were made to stand against a wall. We were made half naked and electric cattle prods were used on our bodies. When the electric prod was used over our clothing, it wasn't so bad. They used electric shocks on our hands, eyes, nose, even our ears, and everywhere. The beatings and other tortures were done as if we were not human beings. They kicked us like a ball and beat us with anything they could get their hands on. When I was being tortured, I felt pity for those who were torturing me. They were not able to understand the value of human life. Though they were human beings, they were acting like animals. I feel pity for them. They are the subject of compassion, and I'm not angry, and I do not think of taking revenge on them.
Chinese, they are supposedly our enemies who invaded us, invaded our country, destroyed our culture, imprisoned our people. But still, I do not blame on any individual Chinese people for all those. There's the system by which they were forced to bend before that system.
What is enemy? It's a perception. What is a friend? It's a perception. This is, of course, on a deeper level. I'm talking more on a deeper spiritual level. Because the greatest enemy is within yourself, the enemy of ignorance. And from out of that comes prejudice, anger, aggression, anger, and desire. These are the greatest enemies. And if you're able to overcome them, overcome the enemy within, then in a sense, whatever enemy outside will not be able to harm you.
To this day, refugees seek asylum in India, bringing stories of continued human rights violations. This family just escaped from Tibet after the Chinese threatened the mother with unwanted sterilization. According to the government in exile, forced sterilization continues to be a serious issue.
When women refused to listen to the Chinese, they would literally catch them like animals. You know, and they even had mobile clinics that went from village to village and just caught the women, sterilized them. And I've had people telling me that if they encountered a moment like that, the whole valley used to be filled with women crying and shouting.
I have seen a lot of women being forced into sterilization and abortions. They were given shots to abort their children even when they were 6 or 7 months pregnant. When I was delivering my first child in the hospital, I saw a lot of fetuses being dumped into the toilets.
In the reception center, I interviewed people who have just arrived from Tibet, and I asked them about their background, what they've been through. I try to find people who've been in prison or who've been in some way victimized by the authorities in Tibet. Violations are still going on, maybe become more and more hidden for the outside world.
Well, I can say the conditions are different, but definitely not better. Different in the sense that the methods of torturing, methods of discouraging the Tibetans to do things on their own have become very subtle.
It's very clear that political protest is still very, very dangerous. People who shout 1, 2, 3 slogans can be arrested, put in jail for 3 years. I've talked to people who were sentenced for 12 years for doing fairly innocent things, like distributing posters or putting up posters on the walls. Sometimes they don't call it prison, they say you're going to school. And this is what's called re-education through labor. But it actually is just like prison.
My sense of reasoning says to forgive and to be compassionate towards the Chinese, to forgive them. Because to take revenge by the method they have adopted in hurting us, I will be perpetuating again violence. So therefore, I should adopt non-violent ways, I should forgive. But my heart says I have to settle scores with the Chinese. So I'm a torn man. Yeah, this is what I feel.
Before leaving their families once again, the 4 Tibetans living in Chicago meet the Dalai Lama. It's considered a great honor for Tibetans to have such an audience with their spiritual and temporal leader.
His Holiness the Dalai Lama asked us about living in America and what we had done before. I told him I had been a teacher of Tibetan language, history and social sciences. He inspired me to work hard for the Tibetan cause in America. Finally, it's time for me to leave my family and return to Chicago. Living in America is a whole new world. Traveling by train in India, people used to talk a lot. Even they knew each other or they do not know. They used to talk a lot. But here when I saw the people sitting in the train, they're all sitting and somebody just listening to the Walkman. Some tries to read some books. I do not know whether they are actually reading or they're just pretending to read, but they do not seem to be talking each other. All human beings, the train is so full of people, but still you are a stranger there. When I went down to the downtown, when I saw the buildings, I felt a bit uncomfortable. Just because when I look up, the buildings, they are too tall, too high, and I felt they're pressing me down. In village life in India, it is open everywhere. You can feel that you can move in any way you like. You can stretch your arms, you can stretch your legs, and you can shake your body any way you like.
In 1990, Congress enacted a bill allowing 1,000 Tibetans to immigrate to America. Not considered refugees, the Tibetans received no state support. The Tibetans have been received with an unprecedented amount of personal support. American volunteers participate in the Tibetan resettlement project in 22 cities across the United States.
I think adjustment for anybody coming from a different place to the American culture is probably a very difficult one. The Tibetan Resettlement Project Chicago is a humanitarian organization designed to help the Tibetan immigrants who are coming to Chicago be successful in their endeavors here. That means that we find them offers of employment, we find them sponsors, we help them with their English language studies, and pretty much try to put together a program of services that will enable them to achieve their goals and to be successful individuals in a new country, in a country that's very, very foreign to their own culture.
The importance of Tibetan Resettlement Project in Chicago, just having the organization gives a certain security to the community here. For the negotiation, and that's something His Holiness probably spoke with. You know, there are a whole lot of different immigrant groups coming to Chicago and to United States. They received all kind of support from the state, but not support on a personal level, personalized kind of support and friendship that we have been able to receive here.
From my personal view, when I got here, I thought that after maybe 2-3 years, I'll make a little money and go back to India, forget about this country. You know, a lot of crazy people over here.
How about you, Sampel?
His Holiness asked, do you people are expecting to really remain in the United States? Or are you, after making money, you will come back?
One of my main aim of coming in America is for the education of my kids. When I bring my kids here, I hope I'll be able to send them to some good school and let them become a good citizen for Tibet too.
Comparatively, America is much better than India. Once you get used to a situation which is comparatively better, you would always like to have the best one.
Sangpo works in a part-time minimum wage job doing ticket sales.
Good morning.
Good morning, Nobru. How are you this morning? How is your morning so far?
I put on a telephone headgear and I receive calls from the customers and I answer them. I have been a teacher. I have been used to working with blackboard, chalk and dusters and not been working with computer and telephone. Somebody asked me to give her a ticket for the Prince concert. This customer wants a ticket for Prince of Wales concert. I'm not able to find where he is playing in Chicago area, so
okay, yes, what it is Prince is a rock concert, so it's not Prince of Wales. Here's how you find it. You hit F3.
Sangpo attends classes at Roosevelt University, where he is studying to become a paralegal. Here, he presides over a mock courtroom trial in class.
Hear ye, this honorable branch of the Circuit Court of Cook County is now in session pursuant to adjournment. The Honorable Judge Norbu Samphil presiding.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Norbu Sample. I am circuit judge assigned to this courtroom, the case of the people of state of Illinois versus Robert McCormick. Are both the sides present?
The defendant invited the state to come into her home. At that time,
To become a student after 14 years is a kind of new experience. All my classmates are grown-up people. They have their own job, having responsibility, and they know what they're going to do.
I took this trip to Tibet, and I wanted to learn a little bit of Tibetan before I went on this trip. So the resettlement office in Chicago gave me Sampal's number because he taught Tibetan in India.
Same kiran, yo, ki, conjunction, kind of conjunction.
Oh, okay.
Ne, ning, la,
Ne Ning La,
norbu,
Norbu,
Sigi,
Yud. And so that's how I met him. And the friendship has just grown. It just seemed natural, the natural thing for me to become his sponsor. Look, Buddhism, and look at Tibet. I think for Sampal not to be a teacher, I think it was a real hard adjustment for him because he was pretty high on the status ladder in India, and then to come to Chicago, to the United States, and be low on the totem pole and part-time minimum wage, that's a lot to swallow. A lot of adjustment, a lot of pride to swallow. Take care.
Okay, bye.
All right, take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
I realized from my own experience when I came to the West, even though I had some form of a Western education, when you come to the West, that the whole way of looking at it is completely different. You have to turn 180 degrees around. And so I think for Tibetans it might be a bit of a shock. They might experience kind of a loneliness, kind of not being able to have time, because people here are very busy to communicate and talk. So I think also Tibetans themselves must really reorient themselves.
When I first came here, I felt sort of isolated. Actually, I'm sort of an introverted man. I do not say much, talk much. I think solution to the feeling of isolation is to open yourself up and talk to the people. That's the thing.
The Tibetans celebrate Losar, Tibetan New Year, in Chicago. They find ways of adapting ancient festival prayers and traditions to their new community.
Through settlement, you see, these 1,000 Tibetans at least make few thousand American friends for Tibet. The basic Tibetan spirit and Tibetan culture seems quite well kept. Of course, you see, some change bound to happen, bound to take place. And in fact, I think some change I personally most welcome.
My dream sort of idea of being in America, living my rest of life in America, is to see, to have a sort of Tibetan culture center where you can not only where you will benefit not only the Tibetans but the Americans and other peoples who are interested in learning something new. Losar, Tibetan New Year, is basically a social festival. We said our prayers in the morning. Now in the evening, we are going to celebrate with our sponsors, our project staffs, volunteers, and our friends and all well-wishers.
Tibet was a very unique culture in art, in dance, in music. These are all means of expressing the kind of the truth of the teachings. The skeleton dance is reminding us that fundamentally we could die at any moment. Two things are certain. It's certain that we will die, but it's uncertain when or how we're going to die. And because it's uncertain when or how we're going to die, we sometimes think we have an unlimited lease on life. And so we kind of procrastinate and we don't really sort out our priorities, and as a result sometimes we live a very trivial life. So if we live with the immediacy of death, remembering that we could die at any moment, then it really enlivens or enriches the life, because in many ways the death is our greatest teacher.
The famed Drepung Loseling monks introduced their sacred arts to the West, providing an opportunity for Americans to experience Buddhist rituals performed by masters. These events helped to broaden interest in saving Tibetan culture. Here, the monks create a mandala made of colored sand, representing both the beauty and impermanence of life.
With the loss of Tibet in the late 50s, and there had come in the West, along with that kind of a great awakening, with the kind of with the Beatles and with the psychedelic movement and so on. It's more than a coincidence when the West was going through such a change and becoming open to spiritual things, that it is at that moment that we had to escape.
Human rights for Tibet! Human rights for Tibet!
Tibetans in Chicago use their freedom of speech to demonstrate for the Tibetan cause on the anniversary of the 1959 uprising against the Chinese occupation.
My wish, my desire, my hope is that a Tibetan America will have a better chance of having a wider view of the world. They will see the world from a broad perspective. And I think it will make a big difference in the reconstruction of future Tibet. I think it's very important.
China out of Tibet! China out of Tibet! China out of Tibet! Free Tibet now!
The Tibetans greet their religious leader on the occasion of his arrival in Chicago to address the Parliament of the World's Religions. One of the important ideas the Dalai Lama developed is to create a new Tibet as a zone of peace, nuclear-free, demilitarized, respectful of the ecosystem, and an international meeting place for the promotion of peace and the protection of human rights.
Usually I described internal disarmament and external disarmament. So it's a zone of peace also. You see, the first genuine peace must create it in our mind. So through that way, whole, you see, concept towards our life, towards our neighbor, towards our environment.
One prophecy which says, when the horses go on wheels, when the iron birds start flying, my people shall scatter all over the world. My teaching shall come to the land of the red face.
Here he addresses a crowd of 30,000 in Chicago's Grant Park. The Dalai Lama won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1989 for his consistent opposition to the use of violence in the struggle for the liberation of Tibet.
Telling you, my friend, whenever you listen Dalai Lama's broken English, oh, be careful. Now today, if we think what kind of a situation about 5 billion of humanity at different continents, different countries, and in one world, same kind of human species, some dying due to starvation, some dying due to, senseless killing, murder, and some, you see, dying with certain illness, such as AIDS. So, many different kinds of problems which we are facing is essentially man-made. That is clear. So, therefore, ultimately, I think the responsibility lying on our own shoulder. The attitude of present Chinese leadership is rather sad. They fixed their mind, and in their mind there is real iron curtain, some kind of a Berlin Wall in their mind.
I think I will not get chance to stay permanently in Tibet as a free nation as before.
Nowadays, I really begin to feel now my last, almost now 15 years, my effort with, I usually call middle way approach, now more or less failing. So that's the situation. But this does not mean I lost my hope. No, certainly, no.
I really miss a road which is in Tibet on which I could walk. A spring water that I can call Tibetan water from which I can drink. All this I miss.
If you talk to any children, they all have this strong feeling of wanting to do something for Tibet and wanting to free Tibet from the Chinese occupation.
The question of Tibet is not a question of religion, not a question of ideology, but that is the question of happiness and suffering of 6 million people.
Tibet should become a sovereign, independent nation. I think we have the right to make the choice, and we have the right to demand, and we must work.
But freedom is not yet in sight, and time is running out for Tibet. For now, this ancient and magnificent culture desperately struggles for survival.